Thanks for joining us.
Talkline Network Radio, America's longest-running Jewish broadcast network, the voice of the Jewish community.
Welcome to the podcast.
You are now tuned in to this episode of our podcast. Today we are going to interview some of the greatest and most influential minds in our field. And now, please welcome your host.
You're listening to Talkline with Zev Brenner, America's premier Jewish broadcast on the air since 1981.
And we're back. It's always good to speak to Ken Abramowitz. He is chairman of American Friends of Likud, general partner NCN Capital and GN Capital. His amazing book is called The Multi-Front War, Defending America from Political Islam, China, Russia, Pandemics, Racial Strife. You can get it on Amazon. So, Ken, good to have you back.
Great to be with you as always.
So much to talk about, but one of the things that intrigues me is Syria. So Syria, I think overall, I want to get your opinion. I think overall it's a good thing for Israel that Iran and Russia is out and Hezbollah is out, even though you have these terrorists taking over who some of them are saying they want to liberate Jerusalem, but I think that it's going to take them a long time before they even get to even think about it because they have so much to deal with domestically.
Yes, well, there's good news and bad news. I'd say there's more good news than bad news. In the Middle East, the Sunnis and Shiites have been fighting for 1,400 years. So, and they never give up. So Turkey and Qatar, the Sunnis, were watching the Iran arc of resistance, or death cult, I call them a death cult, grow. And they publicly announced they wanted to take over the Middle East and then kill everyone in America and then take over the world. And meanwhile, Israel, livid after October 7th, has been basically destroying the arc of resistance, destroying the bad guys in Gaza, destroying the bad guys in Lebanon, and destroying the bad guys in Syria and even Iran itself. And there was a window of time where the Turkey and Qatar realized that they had a chance to take over the Syrian government, and they marched right in because Syria had been so weakened by Israel. So in that sense, the destruction of the Iran axis of evil, the time had come. And so in that sense, it's positive. The bad news is it'll get replaced by a Muslim Brotherhood axis of evil. And fortunately, Israel's blowing up all their weapons, so it's going to be much less deadly than it had been before.
But I mean, overall, the only bad part also that I see is Turkey. Turkey is no friend of Israel, and Turkey is certainly a major winner in what's happening in Syria today. Yes,
Turkey and Qatar usually do things together, usually Turkish troops and Qatar money. And
so that's a lethal combination because Qatar has given a lot of money to Hamas. They supported Hamas. Turkey, of course, is playing the game with Russia, China. So it is a dangerous game that he's playing with Russia, but Russia is a much weakened state than it has been for a long time. So the question is going to be if their bases are going to still stay in Syria, if the new Islamist rulers will allow it.
This is great news. In the Middle East, there's only bad guys. But sometimes there's bad guys and worse guys. So in this example, it's a huge failure for Iran, for Russia, for China, and all of its proxies. So that's the good news. And the bad news is that Turkey, the Muslim Brotherhood, is filling the void. In other words, the Sunnis, and they also want to take over the world. By the way, both Sunnis and Shias want to take over the world and make us their slaves. So, but because of the weakened state of Syria and because Israel blew up their weapons, which America did not do in Afghanistan, by the way, Israel's better off, particularly since Israel's now taken a buffer zone with Syria through Mount Hermon and in the old no man's land, UN no man's land near Quneitra.
By the way, you mentioned something very interesting, Ken, about America not blowing up its weapons in Afghanistan when it pulled out, disgracefully pulled out. We're talking about billions of dollars worth of the most sophisticated weaponry, and I've been told that some of that weaponry ended up in Hamas's hands in Gaza, and terrorists around the world have benefited from it.
Yeah, so it provokes the issue of why didn't America blow up the weapons there in Afghanistan? And there's two, like everything in national security, there's two ways to look at it. One is incompetence, and the other is they didn't want to blow up the weapons. They wanted to give them to the Taliban, which would be consistent if you think that Obama's the president and he wants to hand weapons out to Islamists.
I don't buy that they wanted to give it to the Taliban. I think it was such a botched exit from Afghanistan, everything from the top to bottom. Who would relinquish such a base, which China benefits from? It's what it could have monitored China. Forget it, the weapons alone, just the geographic location was a major thing. I just think that the whole thing was botched, wasn't well thought out. We just, let's get out of here. We'll leave everything. That's how my thinking. It says it was just a terrible, terrible misjudgment.
Yeah, well, look, it's what I said before. You can argue it either way, and I actually go back and forth in my mind. One day I say, what you just said, and then another day I said, no, Obama ordered all this to help the bad guys. So I don't know the answer. I'm just giving you the two sides of the coin. Okay,
I hear that. By the way, did you notice that, for example, that you had this takeover in Syria, Assad is out, he's in Russia, and you have these rebel groups that have taken over Damascus, a bunch of rebel groups. And what does the world condemn? That Israel should be making pullbacks, right?
Well, we bear something in mind. There's roughly 200 countries in the world. Half of them are dictatorships and half are democracies. So the dictatorships are corrupt to the core. So that's half of the world. And for the democracies, half of the other half is corrupt to the core. So basically 75% of the countries in the world are run by criminal organizations. So of course they hate Israel because Israel represents the rule of law. So whenever you have a vote by criminal organizations, they're always going to vote against the rule of law. They hate Jews and Christians. They hate God. They hate the Torah, and they're criminals. So that's welcome to life, right?
Right, but thank God Israel has persevered. It's in a much better position than it was a year ago, and defeating Hamas and Hezbollah and Iran weekend, I think it set the stage for Syria, and Israel's bombing all the strategic areas that could do damage to Israel, Kol Hakavod, and people tell me they want to go skiing on Mount Hermon.
Well, look, there's two Israels. There was the October 6th Israel, which was operating under 50 years of delusions that there could be peace with their neighbors. And then there was the trauma, of course, on October 7th, the Pearl Harbor equivalent. And then there's the rejuvenated Israel on October 8th. So we're now watching the rejuvenated Israel on October 8th. And to quote one of my favorite movies, the Network movie 40 years ago, Israel is as mad as hell, and they're not going to take it anymore. And it's the people are that way, the leadership, Netanyahu's that way, and they're not joking around anymore with their enemies. And this is the way you have to be to live in a very cruel Middle East.
Ken Abramowitz, the chairman of American Friends Likud, chairman Citizens for National Security. His book is still on Amazon, called The Multi-Front War, Defending America from Political Islam, China, Russia, Pandemics, Racial Strife. Thank you for joining us. Look forward to our next conversation.
A pleasure, as always.
Thank you for tuning in to
Talkline with Zev Brenner, America's premier Jewish broadcast, the pulse beat of the Jewish community.
For continuous Jewish programs, TalklineNetwork.com, or our 24-hour-a-day listen line at 641-741-0389. For past shows, you can find us on iTunes, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube, Instagram, and all major podcast platforms, or jewishpodcast.org. Thanks for listening to the TalklineNetwork.com.
Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Good job, Ken.
Great.
Did they give you a job in the administration yet?
Well, they